You're listening to The Main Event with Zach Gelb and Mike Zahn on WHIP.
Josie's on a vacation far away.
Welcome back, everybody. Time in the WHIP studios is 11:36. Zach Gelb here with you, flying solo. It's been two different teams here in Philadelphia. The Eagles are 1-3, coming off a 23-20 loss to the Redskins, and the Temple Owls are the best team in Philadelphia. They're 4-0, and they had a 37-3 victory on Friday night up against the Charlotte 49ers. A man that was on the call for CBS Sports Network was Jay Feely, who was in a rainy Charlotte, and he joins us right now. Jay, Zach Gelb here on Temple's campus. Thanks for a few minutes, and how are you?
My pleasure. That great intro song, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I love the outfields. I'm a big Patriot fan, so they play a little I Don't Want to Lose Your Love at the AFC Championship game, and there was nothing like seeing 68,000 people singing as the Pats went on to win the Super Bowl.
There's nothing better than 80s music.
Hey, and I'm a young guy, and I still like those old school music. But I just want to bring up something real quick about the Eagles before we talk some Temple football. In your career, you were an 82.6% field goal kicker, and you actually made a kick from 61 yards out. Jay, the Eagles stink right now kicking. We need you here in Philadelphia. You interested?
They've been struggling at that position. Yeah, obviously Cody got injured, and I think that impacted his performance. And I've never really been sold on Sturgis. He struggled down in Miami, and they got to find a way because they're playing close games, and they need their kickers to come through, that's for sure.
He basically missed 2 extra points yesterday. He missed a 33-yard field goal and then the extra point. You've been in that situation when you had to come through to a team not being the starting kicker from the beginning of the season and be placed in that role. How difficult is that, and what advice would you give to Caleb Sturgis if he's still on this team by the end of the week?
Well, I doubt that they jump ship so quickly, but it is difficult because you're not in a rhythm, and people who haven't kicked don't really understand how important that is with your snapper and your holder, and understanding how you like the ball, and understanding the cadence and the rhythm that the team uses, as well as with your snapper and your holder. And I went in middle of the season last year to Chicago, and it really took me 3 weeks to just get comfortable where I wasn't thinking about anything when I went up there to kick, where you just knew in the back of your mind, okay, this is the rhythm, this is how it's going to go, and you were comfortable with it. And so it's hard to jump right in and kick well, but it doesn't matter. The expectation doesn't change for the position. You're supposed to make kicks, and that's the reality of the position.
They had that unfortunate situation where Parkey missed that 44-yard field goal to open up the season playing Atlanta in a dome, and then you had the situation yesterday where you put 4 points on the leg of Caleb Sturgis that he just wasn't able to make. That injury, though, with Cody Parkey, it seemed like it was a lingering issue. He didn't look good in training camp. Should Chip have made a change at the kicking position a little bit earlier when he knew the state of his kicker wasn't 110% healthy in Parkey?
No, I don't think he should have. You look at what he did last year and how great a year he had, especially as a rookie. He went to the Pro Bowl. He was a guy that you could rely on, that you were trying to build. And I think every kicker has times where they go through injuries. He hurt his groin, and it definitely was lingering. It wasn't just something that had just happened. It lingered all through training camp. And you're hoping that he can overcome it, and you adjust the way that he goes through his practice routine, and, you might limit kicks. I had a time with the Cardinals where there was, I think, a 4-week period where I didn't kick a single ball in practice for 4 weeks. You just went out and you kicked in games, and you try to let that groin heal up. And unfortunately for Cody, that didn't happen.
Let's get to your take that you had, I think it was yesterday, about the whole extra point rule with the NFL and the kicker's mental confidence. Can you just explain that real quickly to our audience, what your point was?
My point was that the change in the extra points is having an impact on the mental philosophy of kickers. When you had the extra points where, like college it is, where you're snapping from the 2-yard line, you had basically a 20-yard extra point, you didn't have to think about the results at all. So it was basically an in-game practice where you could go out there, you could get grooved in, you could focus just on your form, not worrying about the result, knowing that unless you hit an atrocious kick, which pretty much no kicker in the NFL was going to do, you weren't going to miss it. And so that allowed you to get in a rhythm. And I likened it to a quarterback, at the beginning of the game when you call a couple of screens and you might hit a slant and just some easier routes to get him in a rhythm and to get him comfortable before taking shots downfield and throwing some of those, long 15, 20-yard out patterns, where you've got them into the game and comfortable. I think extra points did that for kickers. And I know for me in particular, I would focus only on my form, and I love to get extra points early, and it got you into a game. Now, you're not only do you have to worry about form and you have to worry about the results on those extra points that are moved back, but there's a heightened level, almost more so for extra points than field goals, because 100% success is demanded. If you miss an extra point, it's a huge deal, and you know that your job could be on the line because of it. And so there's a stress level that's a cumulative effect, and I don't think that a lot of kickers are handling it well. That's not an excuse. I'm not making an excuse for anybody. The reality is you got to make your kicks. That's the nature of the position. But when people ask why are kickers struggling, and this week was the second worst week for kickers since 2010. It was the second most misses, and the 1 week that they had more was late in the season in bad weather. So you haven't even had the bad weather effect yet.
We're spending a few minutes with Jay Philly, longtime NFL kicker and a college football analyst for CBS Sports Network. He was on the call for the Temple football victory on Friday in Charlotte. Let's get to Temple's kicker, Austin Jones, because last year in his freshman year, he was a 59.1% from field goals, and then this year it skyrocketed. I know it's early still in the season to 88.9%. What's been the biggest difference from last year to this year with Jones?
Well, I don't know that I can really speak from an educated manner from last year to this year, but I can talk about this year. And Coach Rule has been very confident in him, not as far as distance. He doesn't have a strong leg, but doing what they need him to do, coming through and making a big kick against UMass to win the game in an improbable comeback victory after they fumbled it away. That's a big kick for a young guy and for a team. And, he had his first miss in the Charlotte game, and I think that had more to do with the rain, and it was kind of a high snap, and the timing was off, and he pulled it. But he looks good. His form is good. I watched him before the game, and I was impressed with his form. And they're not going to ask him to do too much. They're not going to put him out there for 49, 50-yard field goals. I think they're going to keep it inside of 45. And for a college kicker, if you can be consistent for your team inside 45, that's a benefit to have for sure.
This entire special teams unit, and a big reason because of their success, has been the coaching of Ed Foley. They just seem like a more confident group this year, and Jones even said it himself at that UMass game. He went on the field and he knew he was going to make that field goal. But then after the game, head football coach Matt Rule said Jones worked a lot on just getting in better shape in the offseason. And I thought that point was interesting for a kicker, because in week one, we saw the Penn State kicker. He was a little bit of a bigger boy, to say the least. How much does being fit for a kicker actually help their success?
I think it helps tremendously. Whenever I talk to young kickers in high school and even in college, I talk to them about that, because I always felt I was one of those guys like Steve Weatherford who worked out just as hard as anybody else. I think it does two things for you. The first thing is it develops confidence and respect from your teammates. When you're there, when you're running and doing everything, and at the head of the line and beating wide receivers and running backs in drills, and you're working out just as hard as everybody else in the weight room, and that develops a level of respect from your teammates that carries all the way through. I was elected a captain on 3 different NFL teams that I played on, and I think it's a direct result of how hard I worked at my craft, and also when I was out there in the off season running and lifting with everybody. I think the second thing it does, and this directly impacts your results, is it allows you, when your whole body's stronger, it allows you to stay at 80% further back. And I think for any kicker, that's going to be a big advantage for you, because whether it's throwing a baseball or kicking a football or swinging a golf club, you're most accurate when you're at 80% exertion. So if I can stay at 80% all the way back to 53 yards and not kick an extra point any different than a 53-yarder, I'm going to be more consistent. And when you strengthen your body in general, that helps you to do that.
Jay, let's get to this Temple offense. It didn't surprise me that they got off to a slow start with the weather conditions. I always thought all along they were going to win that football game because they were a superior opponent going up against a Charlotte team, that it's their first year in the FBS. What did you see Temple, though, adjust in the second half? Because a big point of emphasis this year was to win the battle in the trenches and really get that run game going, and they were able to do that in the second half.
They definitely were. I went and watched them warm ups. I watched P.J. Walker. I was curious to see how he'd throw in the rain. It's kind of nasty out there, and he was slinging it. Man, he can spin the ball. He threw it better than I thought he would. I was impressed with his velocity and his ability in bad weather with wind and rain to not really have it impact him at all. And I don't think that the struggles were related to him in any way. I thought it was more drop passes, and they had a couple of shots downfield that they could have completed, and one in particular would have went for a touchdown. He could have walked in backwards. I think it was Robbie Anderson. And they had a couple other drop passes, but for the most part, I thought that P.J. Walker played really well, and Jahad Thomas still ran the ball well. And they had a good defensive line. They're not deep, Charlotte's not, but when you looked at, they were number 3 in the country in tackles for a loss coming into that game, and they were number 2 in the country in turnovers coming into that game. So I think offensively, their goal was to not turn the ball over. This is talking about Temple, to not turn the ball over, to be effective in the running game. And for the most part, that's what they did. And it was a sloppy game, but you have to be able to win ugly sometimes.
Yeah, and that's what good football teams do. When they don't have their best, they still find a way to win. And you've seen Temple been able to do that in back-to-back weeks, taking down UMass and Charlotte. Obviously had the big start to the year, beating Penn State and Cincinnati. But in that Penn State, Cincinnati, and Charlotte game, it really seemed like to me that their formula from an offensive standpoint was, 1, win the battle in the trenches, 2, establish the run game with Jahad Thomas, and then give P.J. Walker about 20 to 25 attempts. And they got away from that in the UMass game because they couldn't get the run. Is this Temple team, are they going to be at their best when they could run the football first? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, they're going to run the ball to set up the play-action pass. And when they go into – they had a lot of tendencies going into that game. So when they go into shotgun and they're running the zone read option, they're not taking shots. They're trying to run the ball there and run it effectively, and they're going to hit screens and slants, quick plays. When they go under center – they're either going to go in their power formations or they're going to hit play action, and that's when they take their shots down the field. They took a number of those, against the 49ers, and they just weren't able to bring them in. They couldn't catch them, and they dropped a number of plays. So that impacted their passing game, and I think that was more weather-related than anything, although Coach Rule even said in one of his interviews with us that, it's no excuse. We got to make those plays, and that's true. But I think you're going to continue to see them run the ball effectively and then take shots down the field. And I like this team. I think it's solid across the board. You had 10 sacks against Penn State. You can run the ball. You have a quarterback who can throw the ball and take shots down the field. And you got receivers who can make plays. And I honestly could see them going into the Notre Dame game at 7-0.
Wrapping up with Jay Feely, and I agree with you. I think they will be undefeated going into that Notre Dame game. The only game there could be maybe a hiccup is on a short week at Eastern Carolina. They're 29th.
Carolina's a good team.
Yeah, they do, and they're well coached by Ruffin McNeil. They also have Memphis on the schedule, which will be a tough game. But there's a certain feel with this Temple football team now that there's high expectations. They're expected to be in the conference championship game. They're expected to be in a bowl game and give good efforts up against Notre Dame and Memphis. They're 29th in the country right now in the AP poll. Do you think this Temple team will be a top 25 team by the end of the year?
I think it'll be a top 25 team in a couple weeks. If they keep winning, and you have a signature win and a win against Cincinnati or against Penn State, and you have another good win against Cincinnati, and you have 4 teams in the AAC that are undefeated in Memphis, Houston, Navy, and Temple. And if one of those teams can get through, the gauntlet undefeated, they could end up being the final 16.
Wow, that would be something impressive. Well, Jay, we appreciate you giving us a few minutes today, and I'll get on the phone with Mark Lepselter, call a few people at the Eagles, and we need you back here in town. We'll get you a bunch of cheesesteaks, and we need you to kick some 45-yard field goals for us. Sounds like a plan, right?
Sounds like a plan. I like cheesesteaks, so I'd be good to go for that.
So much for kickers being fit, Jay.
That's right.
Thanks so much. There's Jay Feely joining us. Great job out of him on the CBS Sports Network broadcast the other night as Temple improves to 4-0 on the year as they put up 37 points up against a Charlotte team. All right, we'll take a quick break. Our final one of the day right here in the WHIP studios. Time is 11:51. When we get back, I'll put my finishing touches on the Philadelphia Eagles.